All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Arlington Heights Village Board to order on Monday, December 9, 2024, and ask if you would all please rise and join the Village Board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For purposes of roll call, let me just introduce the board members who are with us tonight. To your right are Trustee Nicolle Grasse, Trustee Jim Tinaglia, Trustee Scott Shirley, Trustee and President Pro Tem Robin LaBedz, Trustee Wendy Dunnington, Trustee Rich Baldino, and Trustee Tom Schwingbeck. I'm Village President Tom Hayes. We have no minutes to approve tonight, nor do we have an accounts payable to approve tonight. So we'll move into recognitions and communications. And I did want to mention under communications, as I think most of you are aware, of the garbage truck explosion that occurred last Friday afternoon that injured 3 of our first responders and damaged a number of homes in the area. I'm very happy to report that the 2 police officers and the firefighter who sustained injuries are doing fine and recuperating. If you saw the video, and having been at the scene myself shortly after it happened, I can tell you that it was but by the grace of God that nobody was killed or seriously injured. We are working with Groot to determine the cause of the incident and to prevent such situations from occurring in the future. If any resident has sustained any damage to their property, they can call Groot's insurance representative at the number up on the screen, 913-491-2277, and reference claim number RC15285. So thank you. We move on in the agenda to citizens to be heard. Are there any members of the audience who wish to address the board on items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll close the citizens to be heard portion of the agenda. We have nothing on the consent agenda tonight, and so we'll move on then into our new business items. And first and foremost, the resolution approving a memorandum of understanding with school districts 15, 211, and 214 and the Chicago Bears Football Club Development, LLC, concerning the redevelopment of the former Arlington International Racecourse property. And before I turn it over to our village manager, Randy Recklouse, let me just make a few comments. Since day one, my goal, as I've stated publicly many times, and for the first time some 3.5 years ago now, is to ensure that the Arlington Park property is put to its highest and best use, befitting of the legacy of our 100-year-old racetrack. Now, the MOU we're discussing tonight does not accomplish that goal, but it does get us further down the road than we've ever been before in determining if a Chicago Bears stadium and associated development does meet that goal for the benefit of not only our community, the village of Arlington Heights, but also the whole Northwest suburban region. As such, the MOU is a significant and necessary step in what has been a very lengthy process. But the MOU not only resolves outstanding short and long-term tax issues by providing a framework for tax certainty, it also provides protection and assurances for the school districts. And from a village perspective, and perhaps most importantly, it allows us to continue productive discussions and receive more definite plans and information that will allow us as the village to do our own due diligence. So let me just assure everyone here tonight and everyone watching at home a few things. First of all, a Bears stadium in Arlington Heights is not in any way a done deal with the approval of this memorandum of understanding. If the Bears decide to refocus on Arlington Park as the site for their new stadium, there will be plenty of opportunities for the public to weigh in along the way. With this update, and in our efforts to be as transparent as possible, you will know everything that we know after the conclusion of this evening. And I can assure you that we have not given or promised anything to the Chicago Bears at this point in the process. The only thing that this village board has done is to agree on a framework that was outlined in our November 2022 pre-development agreement and what is in the memorandum of understanding that's on the table tonight. Finally, and as I have said this publicly many, many times over the course of these three and a half years, we will only agree to a new Bear Stadium in the village of Arlington Heights if it's a win-win for our community, if it provides a net fiscal positive for the village of Arlington Heights. So first, before I turn it over to Mr. Recklouse, I want to personally thank all those involved in getting us to this point, in reaching this now tentative, but hopefully a soon-to-be agreed-upon agreement. And that includes not only our team at the village, including our village manager, Andy Recklouse, and our village attorney, Hart Passman, and many, many others. And the Chicago Bears, including Paul Shadle from DLA Piper, who is here this evening. Paul, if you just raise your right hand. And George McCaskey, Kevin Warren, Karen Murphy, and a number of others at the Chicago Bears. And then our three impacted school districts, District 211, 214, and Elementary School District 15. And so we very much appreciate their hard work in getting us to this point in the process. But having said all that, I can tell you that I'm very encouraged about where we're at in this process. We've got a long, long way to go. We've made a lot of progress in the recent months. And so I'm looking forward to continued discussions as we see where we can go from here. So with that, I'll turn it over to our village manager, Randy Recklouse.
Thank you, Mayor. The last time that I made a presentation on this topic back in March, I outlined the ongoing discussions between the village, the school districts, and the Chicago Bears. And I discussed how we're all working towards a resolution of various open issues, including short-term property taxes for the Arlington Park property while the property remains vacant, a mechanism to resolve the long-term property taxes for when and if a new privately owned NFL stadium is construction there, and ways to protect the village and school districts to ensure that any development will be in our community's best interest and will not overburden taxpayers or create unsupported school children. I'm happy to report that the parties have reached an agreement on a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, to do just that. This MOU, if approved, does not, as you've mentioned, Mayor, mean that the construction of an NFL stadium at the Arlington Park site is a done deal. But it is a significant step forward in the exploration of the development of the Arlington Park property. Tonight, I'm going to be presenting the MOU to the village board for their consideration and a vote. On Wednesday and Thursday of this week, the agreement will be discussed and voted upon by the three school boards. The Chicago Bears Football Club has already indicated to the village and to the school districts that they support the agreement as written. Tonight, I'll be walking us through the agreement, but first, I wanted to outline why we're discussing such an agreement in the first place. I think it's important to provide that context. As you all know, the Chicago Bears Football Club purchased the property back in 2023, and as the mayor alluded to, we entered into a pre-development agreement with the Bears back in 2022 that provided a roadmap for the development process. That agreement remains in effect. In that agreement, the club states that they do not intend to ask the village for financial assistance for the construction of a stadium structure. That is, the stadium would be privately funded and owned and thus would pay taxes. This is different than most professional sports stadiums around the country and even in Chicagoland, with a couple of exceptions. However common they are, publicly owned stadiums do not generate any property taxes for the host community. However, more and more stadiums are now being built with a private real estate investment angle in mind in recent years. And here you can see SoFi Stadium, which is in Inglewood, California, and Gillette Stadium, which is in Foxborough, Massachusetts. The fact that a privately funded and owned stadium and mixed-use district is being contemplated in Arlington Heights is central to the discussion of the MOU. If this were another publicly owned stadium such as Guaranteed Rate Field or Soldier Field, there would be no discussion on long-term property taxes, as they wouldn't be paying any at all. A privately owned and financed stadium district development provides far less risk for the host community, but also provides far more opportunities for profit and revenue for the team and the community. The Arlington Park property is 326 acres, and that's something I think a lot of people don't fully grasp how big that is. As a point of reference, that's bigger than Epcot in Florida. Epcot in Florida is 305 acres. It's almost 3 times the size of the Vatican City in Rome. If you superimpose to scale the outline of Arlington Park over the central part of our community, it runs on the east from Mariano's, goes as far west as Pioneer Park, as far north as the library, and as far south as South Middle School, and encompasses our entire downtown area. If you would superimpose the outline to scale over where the Bears currently play at Soldier Field, you can, number one, see how small of a portion of that outline is filled by an NFL stadium. But secondly, you can see it runs all the way from the museum campus, incorporates part of the marina, all of McCormick Place, and even part of the Bronzeville lakefront site, all in one area. So when you consider the size of our Arlington Park site, you get the idea of the kind of new economic opportunity our site would provide for the team and the entire Chicagoland region. This type of stadium-centered mixed-use development can generate more profit to the team ownership and more tax revenue for the public than any other site contemplated. However, as the village has said all along, any taxes on this site have to be fair, not too high and not too low. That principle is important when and if a stadium-centered development is constructed, and is important now while the property remains vacant. As further stated in the 2022 pre-development agreement and agreed to by both the team and the village, again, the village would not be contributing the cost of the construction of the stadium, but we would consider contributing to the cost of some of the infrastructure needed for the project. But only if A, the village and our consultants determine that the project would not be viable without a public-private partnership, and B, it's determined that the project will generate a net increase in village tax revenues above current levels, even after factoring in any operational or capital costs the village has to incur. As the mayor mentioned, we call that net fiscal benefit. But let us say this again, and this is central to what we're talking about. The new revenue from the site has to cover all of the village's costs and provide a net fiscal benefit for us to consider moving forward. This principle has not changed. They're the same principles we use for any economic development effort, and the same principle we've used in the past with success in such areas as the redevelopment of our downtown beginning 30 years ago. Almost 2 years ago, the issue of short-term taxes first arose as an obstacle. The village understands that the issue of taxes is especially important now when the property is not generating substantial income. We understand that the desire for the Bears to pay taxes in line with comparable properties in the area during this period of time. This is a slide that I've shown publicly before, but I think it's important to set up this discussion. When the racetrack was open and there were horses racing, people betting, people drinking, people eating, and businesses on site, their property tax bill was $3 million. When the Bears bought the property vacant with an unlicensed racetrack on it, their property tax bill went up to $16 million. And a lot of people say, well, they bought the property for X amount, the tax bill should be based on the amount they purchased it for. But that's not how commercial real estate is assessed in our area. Commercial real estate is assessed based on the amount of revenue it can generate, not on the sales price. It's actually not allowed to assess property based on the sales price. That's called sales chasing, and it's a practice that's not permitted. And so I can understand, and we all can understand that when you compare the site when it was generating revenue, paying $3 million, to when it was generating almost no revenue at $16 million, some questions would be asked. And one of the questions that I think anyone reasonable would ask is, if it's going to be $16 million when it's basically vacant, what the heck is that bill going to be when we build a couple of $1 billion privately owned sports facility on that site? And when you look at comparable facilities around the country in the region, you get more questions. The Bears they appealed that issue to the Board of Review, and their initial take was around $8.99 million. For a point of reference, the highest property tax paying stadium in the United States is SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. and that has a performing arts center, shops, a whole development. They're paying, as of 2021, which is the last year I have comparable data, $8.8 million. Wrigley Field, closer to home, again, active ballpark that has concerts and baseball games, they pay $2.7 million. United Center, hockey and basketball games and concerts and events like the Democratic National Convention, pays $6.1 million. The Sears campus right down the road, which was 275 acres, very comparable in size, except that it had, at the time of this assessment, a couple of million square feet of usable office space. They were paying $4.5 million. So again, we understand why these questions arose. And reasonable people can disagree about what should be done, but at the same time, there were legitimate concerns that were expressed that brought this about. So at the same time, the school districts had legitimate concerns as well. Any development of this size will dramatically impact the marketplace, and if not managed well, construction of new housing may impact our schools. It's an important goal of the school districts and the village and other taxing bodies, again, to be able to generate enough new revenue from the development to offset any new costs that we incur so that the new development does not place a burden on existing taxpayers. That's the same principle that the village and the club agreed to in our 2022 pre-development agreement. The proposed MOU provides a framework to solve both the short and long-term property tax issues and to protect the school district interests as we continue to explore the possibility of the project in a responsible and thoughtful manner. Again, the MOU does not mean that the project will go forward. Like the pre-development agreement, the MOU merely provides a framework in the event that we move forward. So what's in it? I'm going to walk everyone through the different sections of this agreement. So Section 1 acknowledges the club's continued exploration of the development of the site, including an NFL stadium and various other uses. It acknowledges that the village will provide services and infrastructure to the project, just like we provide services and infrastructure to every other part of the village, provided there are sufficient revenues from the project to support those items. Acknowledges the district's fears of an increase in students without an increase in revenues, and acknowledges that the parties are jointly committed to ensuring that the school districts will receive revenues sufficient to pay the additional operating and capital costs that the school districts may incur. That's Section 1. There's a lot of recitals. Section 2 is essentially a statement of cooperation and working together in good faith. Section 3 states that while the MOU sets forth the parties' intentions and understanding and plans, ultimately it is up to the Chicago Bears Football Club to decide whether or not to move forward with this project. They own the property. They can decide to do it or not do it. And it states that the MOU is only intended to address the redevelopment of the property that includes an NFL stadium. If the stadium doesn't go forward and it's something else, this MOU would not be in effect. This acknowledges the unique challenges of a project that includes a privately developed NFL stadium. Section 4 is when we begin to get into the meat of the matter. This section protects the school district from unsupported school children. It acknowledges that the village and club do not wish to approve any development that produces unsupported school children. It provides a formula in Exhibit B that shows that the village and the Bears would support the school costs of any new children whose costs are not supported by new revenues going to the school district. It's intended to act as to prevent the proposal and or the approval of residential development that couldn't support the school children it produces. And acknowledges that the club must resume its traffic and financial studies within 60 days after the approval of taxes for the 2024 assessment year. I want to pause here and acknowledge that this is a very important bullet for the village. If you recall, we've talked about this before. In the 2022 pre-development agreement, the club was required to conduct traffic and economic impact and revenue studies for the village. These studies would be key tools for the village to assess the project and its viability. When the tax issues arose last year, the club told its consultants to pause those studies, which had already begun. However, as this agreement resolves those issues, the club has agreed to resume the studies so we can all agree to collectively review the viability of the project together once again. Section 4 also, the village also agrees that it will not approve zoning until an agreement has been reached on school operating costs. So when the question is asked, and it's logical to ask it, what do the school districts and what do the village get out of this agreement? Section 4 is a really great place to start. We have developed agreed upon guardrails for everyone to ensure that any future development is in the community's interest. The other question one might ask is, why write the section this way? Why make it about money? Why can't the village just promise not to zone the property a certain way? The village has no intention of approving a project in the future that has too many residences. Why not just say that? The issue is that our current village board cannot legally bind the zoning decisions of future village boards. But we can make commitments on what we pay for in the future. So we've been calling this section the put your money where your mouth is section. So by promising to pay the extra costs that the school districts incur, the village and the Bears are disincentivizing our successors from making such decisions that wouldn't be in our interest to do so. It's also really important to note, and we've spent a lot of time on this, that village staff truly does not believe that any development this site is going to generate a large amount of school children. If you look at downtown Arlington Heights, in the 1,200 or so new units that have been built since the redevelopment effort of the downtown began 30 years ago, a recent analysis by another school district indicated that there were only 46 school children in total produced at all grade levels for all of those projects. We think that the development pattern will be pretty similar, and thus we really don't think, given the large increase in revenue that is going to be anticipated by the school districts for the project, there will be any shortfall. And we're so confident in that we're willing to agree to these guardrails. In the end, the village can always approve or deny any proposal. And so essentially we have control in the end over the number of units. And we have reassured the school districts with the inclusion of this section for the school districts that their interests will be protected. So this is an important section, Section 4. Section 5 is another important section. We talk about a lot of financial tools here, and so I'm going to spend some time walking everyone through this. I think it's important for everyone to understand. The village has successfully used tax increment financing as an economic development tool in the past, various locations in the village. However, none of the parties really believe that tax increment financing is a really good tool to solve the property tax assessment problem for a unique use like an NFL stadium. It fundamentally does not manage taxes. Under TIF, taxes still need to be paid, but it can be set aside for certain eligible costs. But none of us think this would be a good tool to assist with the construction of a private stadium structure. We do, however, feel that TIF could be a good tool for developing other parts of the project outside of the stadium. If you recall, the stadium is just one piece of this land, and so we feel that it could be a viable tool for other parts of development. That would have to be developed. But we recognize that this is a unique project overall. Normally, a TIF involves an advisory joint review board with representatives of all the local taxing bodies. So representative, the school district, park district, library, et cetera, would be present. And it's normally just advisory. As a sign of good faith, the village has agreed that any TIF anywhere on this site would allow the joint review board to be not just advisory, that its approval of any project would be a prerequisite for any TIF deal on the project. We really want our fellow taxing bodies to feel good about any TIF deal that's done, and we feel that that's not too high of a bar for a project of this nature. This would provide a higher level of transparency and partnership out of the recognition of the huge economic impact this project could have in the area, and we don't want to do anything lightly. As TIF is not a great fit for a privately owned stadium, we all believe that a new tool will have to be developed by the state of Illinois to help facilitate major privately funded projects of this kind. We need to find something that's going to provide new significant revenues to host communities, but in a predictable way for the property owner. This project, if it moves forward, will be one of the biggest redevelopment projects in the history of the state. And we believe it's appropriate to consider creating new tools and for this and other similar projects around the state in the future. So the new tool that the village, the schools, and the Bears are suggesting be created already exists in other states around the country. It's called payment in lieu of taxes, or pilot. So how would this work? The village and developer or property owner would negotiate a pilot agreement that would have to be approved by a local review board made up of representatives of each of the taxing bodies, very similar to the joint review board used in TIF. But each of the taxing bodies that cover the site, again, school district, park district, library, village, et cetera, would have a representative. The pilot agreement would be set for a predetermined period of we've negotiated between 23 and 40 years. The property owner would still pay taxes as set prior to the agreement, but they would be frozen for the period of the agreement. In lieu of the increased taxes, they would make an agreed upon payment in lieu of taxes for the term of the agreement. They would make these payments above and beyond the normal taxes. The payment would also be subject to agreed upon increases during that time period. The taxing body review board would vote based on the proportion of the tax bill they're responsible for. So because school districts are responsible for such a big percentage of our tax bill, they would get the biggest say, given that they are the largest share of our property taxes. So they would have to agree to whatever this pilot agreement said, knowing how it was going to impact their finances for a period of time, knowing what the increases would be. After the agreement ran out, the property would get reassessed just like any other property in the community. This tool would have to be created by the state legislature for this to proceed. And one of the other things we agreed on is TIF could not be used on the same part of the development as pilot. It would have to be one or the other. So why would any of the parties benefit from this arrangement? The property owner would be able to know with certainty what their taxes are for a specified period of time. They'd have their property taxes, but they'd know this pilot, what this would be for a significant period of time. This would have a significant impact on their ability to borrow money, and it lowers and finance such a large project. These are unique projects and difficult to finance. It lowers the risk to the developer and the bondholders. Similarly, though, the local taxing bodies receive tax certainty as well. And they would get a seat at the table to determine, negotiate, and plan for the long-term revenue, which is very different than the standard property tax process, which is managed entirely by the county. Who would be eligible for this program? The intent would be for this tool to only apply to very large, unique projects, not typical developments. So you can ask, would this program give businesses an unfair advantage? The village does not intend to use this tool, if it's created, and any typical elements of the project that would compete with existing businesses. So we wouldn't be looking to use this on, something that involved restaurants or hotels or shops, only on unique elements such as a potential NFL stadium that don't exist anywhere else in the community. That would be our basis that we've discussed. And it's still, I know people will ask, well, why not just have them build it on their property and pay taxes normally? Again, most stadiums are publicly funded and generate no property taxes. The nature of property taxes in our state discourages investments in large projects. In Illinois, large private stadiums are rare and often have special tax arrangements, such as the special legislation that enabled the United Center. The United Center had a set tax rate for a number of years that they went to the state legislature in exchange for having a privately owned stadium. And the historic tax credits that Wrigley Field enjoys. Because there is a historic building, they get a lot of tax breaks. So those are really the two examples, and they both had ways that they resolved this problem outside of the normal process. But this tool that we're talking about could encourage private investment that will result in a large amount of new revenue for communities, but in a predictable way that benefits all parties. The concept ensures that all local agencies have a seat at the table and have an opportunity to protect their interests, including the school districts who have the highest proportional vote on any pilot agreement under this model. Under this agreement, the village, the school districts, and the Chicago Bears Football Club all agree that they would support such legislation if introduced in Springfield. But again, this concept does not yet exist. It requires action by the state to move this forward. While such a tool has been discussed previously, this refined concept that we've developed as part of the MOU provides stronger local oversight and very specific guardrails for taxpayers and local agencies beyond anything that's been discussed in the past. This is a tool that would be available to any community in Illinois if it were created. Moving on to Section 6, we talk about community benefits agreements. And this is something that we've found many stadiums have with their host communities. And the parties would agree to negotiate a community benefits agreement on other benefits that the project would bring to the region. These would be things such as use of the new facilities for high school games or youth sports, graduations, the hiring of local businesses or firms for the construction or support of the project in order to generate local jobs, In other words, such an agreement would attempt to outline the various benefits to this project, in terms of what this would bring to the entire Chicagoland region beyond just the local tax revenue that we would be talking about here in Arlington Heights. Section 7 is also one of the meatier sections. As I mentioned earlier, short-term taxes, while the property remains vacant and generating very little revenue, is a very important factor for the parties. For 2023 taxes that are payable in 2024, the Cook County Board of Review said the assessment for the property should be approximately $125 million, but assessed as an improved commercial property. This would generate a taxable of around $8.99 million for that year. There was disagreement on whether the property should be considered improved or unimproved in 2023. As part of the year, the racetrack was still standing, even though it was an unlicensed facility. And part of the year, it was torn down. And so, therefore, this agreement is silent on that matter for 2023 taxes, as that'll ultimately be determined by the Property Tax Appeal Board and or the courts. In 2024, there is no question that the property is now to be considered vacant or unimproved. In the context of this agreement, the parties all support a settlement using the County Board of Review figure of $125 million and that the property is now vacant. This in and of itself, the county's assessment of the property at $125 million and the fact that it's vacant lowers the taxes for the site. This agreement did not create a new negotiated property tax figure. It merely acknowledges that the parties will not dispute the figure already developed by Cook County, the Cook County Board of Review, as it applies to the now vacant site. That's something I really want to stress, that this was not a number that was arrived out of thin air. This is a number that the county developed, and using a status of the property that we all acknowledge is now true for 2024 and beyond. The county figures for a vacant site will generate a tax bill of approximately $3.6 million per year. I do want to note that this $3.6 million figure is higher for this vacant piece of property than the $3 million that the racetrack was paying when it was in active business before it was closed. Under our agreement for 2025 through 2027, or what the agreement calls the beginning of the pre-construction period, the parties agree that they can support keeping the property at that same assessment level. For assessment years 2028 through 2030, the parties can agree to keep the assessment levels the same if by the end of 2027, the Bears have submitted formal application to the village for land use entitlements required for the construction and operation of an NFL stadium on the property. If they do not, then the assessment will begin to increase by the Consumer Price Index. That does not mean that the village has to or will approve that application. A robust review will take place for any application on this project. It just sets up the framework of how this would be reviewed. For assessment years 2031 to the end of the pre-construction period, once again, the property can remain at that level until construction begins if the Bears begin applying for permits for construction of the property 6 months after the village approval of entitlements, or if that occurs by December 31st of 2030. The districts and the Bears agree in this MOU to work in good faith to seek approval of a property tax settlement consistent with this section by the Cook County Board of Review. But again, the decision on whether or not to approve this property tax amount still lies with the Cook County Board of Review. It is not up to us. It's not up to us. This outlines a framework that we can all support. There is a new clause that was also added that any stadium deal with the Bears, funding a stadium outside of Arlington Heights, if anything like that is approved, if a governor of this or any other state or a mayor of any community approves such an agreement or legislation for an agreement, if that happens, the village and the school districts have the collective right to terminate this agreement. And property taxes will go back to the county as they normally are and be assessed by the county assessor, and that will play itself out how it plays itself out. Section 8. Parties agree to cooperate regarding interactions with the public and the media. Section 9, is notices, read the agreement. It's just kind of legalese. And that's it. I know this has been a lot to go over. We have always known that the discussion and exploration of this project would be filled with twists and turns and unique challenges. Staff believes that the agreement negotiated is fair to all parties and provides additional guardrails for the public while still facilitating the exploration of a unique, one-of-a-kind development in our community. Many of the elements of what's been discussed in the MOU remain out of our hands. But this agreement allows us to continue to explore the development in a responsible way and in a thoughtful manner. A lot of work has gone into this agreement, and I too want to thank our partners at the Chicago Bears Football Club and school districts 15, 211, and 214. I also especially want from our team to acknowledge the efforts of our recently retired Community Development Director Charles Perkins, Finance Director Tom Keeney, and Village Attorney Hart Passman, who have played key roles in the negotiation of this MOU. The public, if you're interested, can find the agreement, an FAQ sheet on it, and other documents on our website, www.vh.com/Arlington Park. The staff recommends approval of the MOU tonight, but we're happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Great job in boiling this down to something that's understandable by non-attorneys and non-tax people. And so hopefully it was pretty clear. There's a lot of legal and tax wordage, language in the document itself, and it's necessary to protect all the parties, all the stakeholders. And so you could tell what a difficult task it was, because when you've got the village, the Bears, the three school districts all trying to come to an agreement, and really we were arguing at some point word by word in terms of trying to come to a final document that could be approved by all parties. And so, again, just a monumental task, but we were very fortunate to come to an agreement on the language. And this is something that has been, again, tentatively approved by all of the stakeholders and all the parties that were involved in the process. So Randy did a great job, again, of boiling it down. He mentioned the FAQ, the frequently asked questions. That is even a better document, I think, because it's so clear in terms of boiling it down to non-legal, non-tax language. And I really thank Diana McCula and her team and all those involved in really coming up with some very clear language that really answers the regular person's questions about what all this means. Not just this MOU, but where we're at in the process. And so, again, thank you, Diana, and your team for that great work. And please, if there's something you don't understand after you leave here tonight, go to our village website, and particularly the Arlington Park redevelopment page, and go to the FAQ, or frequently asked questions. It really, really clearly defines and explains what we're talking about here tonight. So with that, thank you again, Randy, and I would like to turn it over to the village board for questions or comments. Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Mayor, thank you, Randy, you and your entire staff and Hart. As it said, this is a huge project, and this is a great first step. Just a couple of questions. You'd indicated the school boards are going to be looking at this Wednesday and Thursday. Right. Obviously, we're looking at it tonight. Have the Bears, you indicated that they kind of agreed to this. Did they sign off on it and give us a signed document?
We don't have a signed document, but you know what brought us to this point was them telling us that they could agree to this agreement as written.
Okay. And then you had said that after the approval of the taxes for the 2024 assessment period, they have 60 days to give us the traffic study and the impact study?
Resume them.
When approximately is that going to start?
Well, it depends on when the taxes get settled through the border review process. We think it's probably reasonable to assume that would happen sometime in, early 2025 in terms of us being able to resume those studies. Some of the information in the studies will have to be updated because it's been a couple of years. We want to make sure it's fresh. And as you recall, too, the village will be doing its own studies that will work in tandem with those to make sure that any decisions that the board is making are very well-informed decisions.
Were they going to be providing us monetary funds to do those studies? Wasn't that originally discussed?
Yes, in the pre-development agreement, one of the portions of that was that, we're hiring our own, they have their own firms doing studies. We also are hiring our own firms to do those studies. They would be reimbursing us for the costs. And this is pretty common, if we, for projects big and small, that if the village has to incur additional costs as part of review of a project for the developer to reimburse us for those costs. And so it's a bigger project, but the principle remains the same.
Okay. Well, as I said, it's a great first step. I think what's probably most important to our residents, because this is a topic that everybody wants to talk about, is really moving forward and getting that property developed. Because sitting there empty is not doing our village any good at all, other than a little bit of tax dollars that we're bringing in. But I think getting it developed, whether it's the Bears or somebody else, that's really the key, I think. I mean, I'm excited about a possible stadium development, but I will say, as we've talked here a few times, it's got to be a win-win. You said earlier that, it has to be a win for our residents, both financially and for quality of life, but I think it's got to be a win-win for our businesses too. So, I'm looking forward to the discussions, and, I'm happy with at least this first step that we've made. So,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Other questions or comments? Trustee LaBedz and then Trustee Shirley.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. Excuse me. And thank you, Randy and Hart, and everyone who was involved in negotiating the MOU and preparing the resolution. I have a few questions, and you'll have to bear with me. They're going to be kind of repetitive. I sometimes need an explanation more than once, especially in some of this tax stuff. So the first question, though, is in the resolution, and specifically in Section 2 of the resolution. And that is, what is the definition of substantially mean in this? It concerns me a little bit where the resolution says the village president and board of trustees hereby approve the memorandum of understanding in substantially the form attached to this resolution, and a final form to be approved by the village manager and the village attorney. What my concern is, will we not have more involvement as a board?
Trustee LaBedz, as that phrase, that we often see that, as you know, in our resolutions for a variety of approvals this board grants. As I would interpret it and guide staff, would be, there would be no changes in any material terms. Anything, I don't know of anything that would need to change, but it would be semantic, stylistic, nothing substantive whatsoever. Anything like that would be outside substantially. And that would have to come back to you if that happened. But again, we're not expecting that from any of the parties.
Yeah, my intention is for there to be no changes, other than if there's a formatting change or something like that for legalistic purposes. But the words of this agreement were, as you all know, very carefully crafted by all 5 entities involved. And so, we would certainly come back to you guys if anything like that changed.
Thank you. That's what I hoped to hear. It's what I expected to hear, but I wanted to hear it out loud, so appreciate that. Then I have a few questions on the MOU, and as I said, they might be a little repetitive. And I kind of want to ask again about the resumption of studies by the Chicago Bears Football Club. Did I understand that this wouldn't happen? Did you say something this evening that said this wouldn't happen until the tax settlement? That I was not expecting to hear.
Yes, that's how it's written, is within 60 days of the settlement of the 2024 taxes, which, that has to happen soon because of the way that process works. Then within 60 days of that, they would be required to resume the studies. They could do it earlier, but that's what the provision of that's what the MOU provides for.
And if they don't, does that make this void?
Yeah, I mean, if they're not proceeding with any aspect of this in good faith, then we wouldn't have to pursue with any of this as well. I mean, I think we've been very clear that we cannot review this project in any way, shape, or form without having that type of information. We've said that from the get-go, and they understand that. And they are not looking to withhold that. When they developed doubts about the project due to the taxation issues, a while back, they told their consultants to put their pencils up, which we understand, but we've said, when we get these issues resolved, they need to get back to work, and they've agreed to it.
Okay, so even though we hear talk and rumors of all kinds of things in the media, they sign off on this, we're expecting them to move forward when the time comes with.
With the studies, yes, and
the
certainly nothing is preventing them from continuing to do due diligence in other sites.
Sure.
That's their right. That's what they need to do what they need to do, but this just speaks to conducting the studies for our site.
Okay, thank you. A couple more questions. One is, on the, in section 5, on the joint review board, all members this would be A to B. And it just says, where all members of the joint review board can vote. In this particular situation, is this also proportional, or is it, does each vote equal 1?
So you're talking about the joint review board for tax increment financing?
Yeah, section 5.
Yeah, so if there were, again, we don't believe that TIF would be would work for a stadium. We don't think that it's a good fit for it. If there were some portion of a stadium that was touching a TIF or covered by a TIF, that would be based on that proportional voting. If there's a TIF, or what I call a regular TIF, any other part of the site, that would be on a one person, one vote basis, which is similar to how joint review boards work now. So everyone would get an equal vote to approve that.
Randy, if I could you just talk more into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Did you say?
I want to add to that on what the manager mentioned as if there is a TIF on a part of the property that doesn't have a stadium, it would be the normal one member, one vote rule. However, unlike the statute and every other TIF I know of in the state, this agreement would give that joint review board essentially the veto authority, because normally a joint review board is only a recommending body, and a village board or city council can overturn that recommendation. By this agreement, the village is agreeing that it would not do that. Essentially means that the other taxing districts, a majority of them would have to agree to a TIF of any kind anywhere.
Which is, go ahead.
It would require both a vote of the village board and the joint review board. It wouldn't be replacing the village board's vote. But yes, this was something we really wanted to show our good faith and say that we're not going to propose a TIF that everyone can't agree is a good thing. And to that point, we work closely with our joint review boards. There hasn't been one that our joint review boards haven't recommended in favor of. So, I mean, we feel this is consistent with our practices in reality.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then in section 7B, B2, and that's the assessment years 2028 through 2030. This is where it's getting down into the weeds. That this is still unimproved property, correct?
Correct.
In that part of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we presume so at that point, yes.
Okay, and then could you please just go over the next section 3 in that section, the assessment years 2031 and through
crack
the
at
end
this
of the pre-construction period? Just say it again
Sure.
out loud.
Absolutely. Happy to take a crack at that. These additional periods are meant to reflect the triennial reassessment that the county assessor engages in. So the next one coming is 25 through 27. That is set already by agreement at the 125 million mark. As you mentioned, the 28 through 30, they've got to, as the manager mentioned, the Chicago Bears would have to apply for all of their land use entitlements by the end of 27 to qualify for the freeze for the next triennial, 28 through 30. For the remainder, for 2031 through what we call the end of the pre-construction period, which is basically until they start building up out of the ground, they would qualify for the freeze for that remaining period, which would be some portion of the 31 to 33 triennial, if they have submitted an application for their building permits for the stadium construction. And they have to have done that by the later to occur of the end of 2030 and the date that's 6 months following approval by this village board of all of their zoning entitlements. So what this agreement anticipates, although no one has a timeline yet, is that it would be within that 28 to 30 period that this board would be vetting the zoning entitlements. And if it gets through them, then for the Chicago Bears to qualify for the next triennial freeze, they'd have to apply for their building permits. The purpose of both of these is to keep the project moving forward. If the club remains interested in this site as it does its due diligence, we wanted to see that they would move into the studies, then into the zoning process, which will be lengthy, and then into construction. Once vertical construction happens, once they start putting beams up into the air, that freeze expires. And the agreement makes no provision for what would come after that.
Okay, thank you. That helps me a lot to understand it. And I didn't pick up on the triennial portion of it, so that was part of what was getting me confused. That is all I have for right now. I may have other questions later. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Shirley.
First of all, Randy and Hart, thanks for the hard work. I'm very anxious to get this thing moving along. For the last couple of years, I wish the Bears would kind of stop yanking around and get serious about Arlington Heights. Because when you look at the press, it just seems like they're always looking somewhere else besides Arlington Heights. This gets a little bit frustrating for me anyway. But a couple of questions. In section 1, paragraph K, or section K down there, I don't want to read the whole thing, Hart or Randy, but it kind of says, what I'm getting out of that is that the Bears have said that with the Cook County assessor's valuation of the property, that at that valuation and that tax bill level, that the project is not financially feasible. Right? And so are we signing this, if we approve it, are we saying, did we look at financials? Did we look at projections? Did the school districts look at some kind of analysis that shows, here's what it costs to build a stadium, here's what it costs to bring in utilities, here's what the tax bill, what is this based on? Is it based on anything, or are we kind of just taking the Bears' word for it?
If you look at, the recitals are kind of the introduction to the agreement. And if you look at some of the statements in the recitals begin with, the parties agree that, and some of them, start otherwise. And in that section, it talks about the Chicago Bears Football Club has determined that, that the taxes are making their project unfeasible. We wouldn't have a basis to determine that because we haven't looked at the studies and looked at all that yet. And so that one does not begin with the parties agree that. It's more kind of just acknowledging that the Bears' position is they can't make this work.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious whether or not there was any more detailed stuff that, that was based on, that was shared. And then in section 5, in the subsection A, it kind of talks about the parties will use all reasonable efforts to secure the adoption by the Illinois General Assembly of the pilot legislation. Do we know what that includes? Like, have the school districts talked? Is that basically our lobbying efforts? Is it something more than that? I mean, I'm trying to figure out, like, what are we committing to as far as what are our mechanisms to kind of promote and push for the adoption of that legislation?
All reasonable efforts is a general term. I mean, I think generally it means that, we will advocate as organizations through our lobbyists for these bills, do things that we need to do to try to get legislative support. It's a difficult thing to measure, but it's a show of good faith that we will all work towards this goal to get this thing achieved. I don't know, Hart, if you want to speak
I
to
think
that.
that's well said.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Grasse.
Oh, thank you. I really want to give my appreciation to the hard work of all of you involved with this complex agreement. I am in support of this non-binding, I just want to mention this is a non-binding agreement. And what I really appreciate about this is that it's really an agreed upon roadmap of mutuality of sorts. And that's kind of how I've been looking at it and seeing it. It's really a roadmap of good faith for all parties involved to come to the table to work out this if it comes to be. It's really a roadmap of mutual community benefit for all the parties involved and affected. And so that's kind of how I'm seeing this, and we have to start somewhere. And I think this is a great place to start for all the parties involved. And so I'm in support of this so far. I thank you for all the work with this. I have to say, I also really appreciate the extra piece with requiring the Joint Review Board approval. and having all those parties again involved in those big decisions. This is all about that roadmap of mutuality, and we all have an important place at the decision-making table as this is going forward. I did want to ask about the studies. You mentioned the traffic and financial studies. Is there a place in there that's the environmental studies, or is that just understood?
Environmental studies would have to be done as part of the
Okay.
review of the project. The traffic and economic studies are things that we're kind of looking for, given the nature of this project. But there would have to be work, geotechnical work for anything like this.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, other questions from the board? Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. I just want to make a couple of quick comments. Number one, I want everyone in the room to know and at home that what Mayor Hayes mentioned at the beginning of this is exactly how I feel about this. And no one knows a marathon better than Mayor Hayes. How many of you run?
38.
38 marathons. This is not a sprint race. This is a marathon. And we've been working on it, and staff has been so good at protecting us so far with all of this. And here we are, a couple, 2-3 years into it, and we're still just at the beginning. Nothing is done. There's no behind closed doors deals being made anywhere. But I wanted everyone to know that I support this 100%. I have my orange Hershey and Bears tie on today. For anyone who cares to comment on it, it is a wonderful opportunity. And that's how I see this. It's a wonderful opportunity so long as everyone in District 25 and all the other districts and everyone at home here in our wonderful little town are protected. And as you've said, Randy, many times, it's win-win, win-win for everyone. I'm a huge fan of the Bears. I'd love to see them come here so long as everyone gets the best end of the deal. So that's
Okay,
all I
thank
have.
you. Trustee Dunnington.
Thank you. I had a question about the zoning and also pilot. For zoning, one of the items says that the Bears will also update the conceptual site plan. And so what could we expect from that? It would not be architectural plans, correct? It would be just kind of an overall plan of the
Yeah, if you
property?
recall back as part of the 2022 pre-development agreement, they had that concept plan that they developed. That was not something that was approved by the village. Again, a lot of work needs to be done before we approve any kind of layout like that. It's just kind of one of the things that they're gonna have to do is obviously that conceptual site plan is gonna have to be reviewed, updated on an ongoing basis as part of this process. And so it's kind of a general statement to acknowledge that that's gonna be part of the next phase of the conversation is things like land uses and access and all of that.
Okay. And then for the pilot, so if a pilot was approved by the General Assembly, so my guess is that that would be the stadium piece. So that portion of the property would kind of be pulled out to a pilot. And so would this tax agreement still apply once there was a pilot in place? Because we would no longer have the 326 acres once there was a pilot approved for the stadium piece.
So a couple of things. What we're proposing is that, if the state created the pilot tool, then the community could determine whether to do a pilot agreement, the taxing bodies.
Okay.
So the way it works in the MOU is on the one hand, because this is a 13-page document and I didn't read it word for word, but one of the sections speaks to you couldn't establish a pilot until vertical construction is beginning on that site. And so,
Okay.
the two time periods shouldn't be able to overlap.
Okay.
And so I don't know if anything else you
Yeah, no,
want.
they can't, to be more specific. The header paragraph of section 7B says that the parties are working together for a final assessed value from 2025 through the earlier to occur of, and the first possible trigger to end the property tax deal is the assessment year in which a pilot incentive agreement takes effect with respect to the property. So if pilot legislation is adopted, and if the parties agree to pursue it, and if the parties come to terms on it, when that agreement takes effect, all the property tax deals in section 7 fall away.
Okay.
And the pilot would step in. I agree, presumably, and without knowing any more specific dates, presumably all of this is happening around the time that construction is really getting underway in earnest. But that's not set by this document. That's just everyone's best guess based on construction patterns.
Okay. And would the village board be involved in the pilot agreement?
100%. Yeah. We would, like, as we're the ones that engage in economic development, the first go-around would be with the village board and the village staff, and we would then, essentially, if it works like TIF, we would pitch this then to this other group. We probably would be seeking their input in advance, knowing that they'd have to approve it, but there would be back and forth. But essentially, if the village board didn't want to do it, it wouldn't happen. That would full stop be the end of the discussion. So that would be the first phase, and then the final approval then would be with that joint review board.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, anything else from the board? Seeing none. Before we go to the audience, I do want to give a representative from the Bears an opportunity just to say a few words. If he has any thing to say, then that's Paul Shadle again, who's one of the Bears attorneys and was heavily involved in the preparation and getting us here to this point. So Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, and I will be very brief. I just wanted, on behalf of the Bears, to thank the village board, the village staff, and all of the school boards for, as you've described, the very hard work to develop this very complicated but good agreement. So thanks very much.
All right, thanks, Paul. All right, we'll go to the audience then. We do have just 4 blue cards, and you're just reminded of the 3-minute time limit. And so the first individual is Colin Gilbert, and then next is Martin Bauer. Colin?
Is there a clock, or do I keep my own time?
There's the clock up there.
Oh, there it is. Nice. All right, everybody huddle up. A little football joke to start with. Thank you. Is this thing on? Yeah. My name is Colin Gilbert. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you guys. I come to you today as a resident of Arlington Heights, an alumni of District 214, and someone that has kids who are going to be in District 214. Not there quite yet, but they're going to get there. I'm excited. I'm here to congratulate you guys. Thank you for all that you've done and for getting us to this point. It's a tremendous collaboration that I know has taken a long time. I know a lot of times you guys take a beating in public, and I just wanted to stand here and say thanks and let you know that your work is appreciated. And on behalf of the people that I know who are also of that opinion, thank you. This is a proud day for the village. We're all very proud of the work that you've done. I know there's lots of work to still be done. I know that you guys will proceed in a fiscally responsible manner. I know that you'll protect the businesses like you always have. This village has not become what it is without you, and I expect that you will fully continue to operate in the way that you have. Look out for the residents, look out for the businesses, look out for everybody, and make this a great place to live. I want the residents to get excited about this. I'm excited about this. I hear a lot of temperance, that this is just the beginning, et cetera. Well, I'm pumped. I think this is great. I'm a big fan of this. I know that this is a big step in this process. And kudos for getting there. So I will be passionately excited about this. I hope you guys vote for this. I know a lot of people watching at home are hoping you vote for this. So let's get it done. I think it'll be great. I had a nice little phrase here that hopefully this puts us in the red zone, and now we can punch this through, and this whole town can start operating and getting ready to do a touchdown celebration and welcome the Bears in a way that only the residents of this town can. So I think I'm officially out of any sports innuendos. So with that, I will step away. But thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Next is Martin Bauer and then Donald Mearsman.
Well, thank you. My name is Martin Bauer. I am a 27-year Arlington Heights resident. I'm a huge fan of Arlington Heights, but I'm also a concerned taxpayer and maybe represent those who aren't quite as excited as the pumped-up version that is before you as well. I'm not a huge fan of subsidies for big businesses, so let me try and make it brief. The MOU certainly gives the Bears the tax certainty, that is the tax break that they've been asking for, and that's great. I honestly don't think that Arlington Heights and the school districts are getting a whole lot in return, and I'm somewhat concerned about that. I would have recommended for you to vote no at this point. But let me take a step back. The MOU contemplates a massive development project with massive subsidies. It mentions TIFs 10 times. So let's stick with the concept of a TIF for just a moment. The fundamental concern that I have and that residents that I have talked to have is that TIF districts tend to raise taxes for taxpayers. How? Well, let's pretend that a new development increases the village, meaning population, but also roads and so forth, by 10%. The new development will, of course, require services: police, fire protection, maintenance of new parks, roads. The most logical assumption is that the need for services increases proportionately, meaning 10% more village requires 10% more services, and to pay for those services, that means the need for 10% more taxes. However, the mechanics of a TIF redirect all those incremental property taxes from the new development, which means logically that the additional taxes can only come from the existing development. In other words, taxes on existing residents would have to increase. That is what residents are concerned about and what I implore you to take into consideration. So far, I've not seen anything from the village, from the Bears, or anybody else to alleviate those concerns. The most positive aspect of the MOU is, in fact, that it calls on the Bears to resume the work towards the traffic and economic impact study. I'm keeping an open mind, and I'm really looking forward to that. And so lastly, let me just reiterate what I've been suggesting in the past and what I would want for you to take into consideration, even though it's still a bit away. Any comprehensive redevelopment proposal should be voted on by the residents of Arlington Heights in a special referendum. If the proposal is a good one, it will pass. Conversely, if it doesn't pass, then it shouldn't happen. 3 seconds left. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bauer. It should just be noted that this MOU really deals with tax issues. It doesn't deal with revenue issues. And so the revenue issues are going to be something that I think will be a substantial benefit to not only our community, but the surrounding Northwest Suburban region. And that's yet to be determined. And so, you know, I'm forecasting in my own personal estimation that the revenues that would be derived from a Bears redevelopment at Arlington Park would be substantially greater than what was existing at the Arlington Park racetrack. And so that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm hoping that our analysis will determine as we go forward. But just remember that we're only really dealing with the tax issues right now. Mr. Ecklaus.
I would just to underscore your point, I think it's a good one, Mayor. I think a lot of people, there's a misconception, we hear a lot that the village was getting a lot of revenue from the racetrack when it was active. We really were not, especially relative to 325 acres. The amount of revenue that we got from the racetrack was in the ballpark of around $800,000, $900,000 a year, which is comparable to a really good-sized car dealership or 2 cannabis dispensaries. So it's not when you look at the type of development that could go there that we're talking about, it would undoubtedly be quite a bit more.
Okay, thank you. Next is Donald Mearsman and then Keith Moons.
My name is Donald Mearsman. I've been a resident in Arlington Heights for 43 years. Your Honor, thank you very much, and thank the trustees very much. I don't think people appreciate how much time and effort you put into this. Mayor Hayes, you've put up with a lot of guff, and we do appreciate that. I don't always agree with you, but I know that you work very hard. I'm looking forward to hearing seeing the economic impact statement. I have asked about that previously. I know that the Bears are now required to provide one, and the village is also going to require one. If the village, I am not in favor of public subsidies for private businesses. But in this particular situation, which as you have pointed out, is a very unusual situation, perhaps, I don't think it's going to happen, but perhaps you could suggest to them that we would be very happy to consider public financing if they would allow us to invest in the team. They're going to have to, they're going to have to raise a lot of money, and the smart money boys and the private equity people are going to be very interested because they got to raise a lot of money. Perhaps we could join them as partners in progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mearsman. And next is Keith Moons.
Well, President Hayes, at least the loser Bears have a winning record in Arlington Heights. So far, including this soon-to-be-approved MOU framework, they are undefeated here in getting favorable tax treatment from our board. Maybe they should relocate here in Arlington Heights because then they can continue with their winning streak here. Since this project has been deemed financially infeasible without local tax subsidies, as a resident here, I am very concerned about how much my local taxes will escalate as a result of these MOU covenants. Unless, of course, the Board of Trustees wants to amend this tonight and include my property's assessed valuation will only increase tied to the CPI each year, which is only about 2 to 5%. I would take that. In my opinion, this MOU is favored way too much to the loser Bears. And since it is non-binding and isn't trying to pass it off as being maybe yes, maybe no, we'll go with it, since it is non-binding, it should be rejected by the board tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moons. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to address the board on this agenda item? Why don't you come forward if you would? And when you get there, just give us your name, and you're just reminded of the 3-minute time limit.
Yes, my name is Tom Child. I'm a lifelong resident, also for better or for worse, a student of District 214. I have a question. Thank you for the hard work, because as a business owner, I can understand the tediousness of coming up with a report like this. My question is simply, with all the hard work you've put into this, and since the school districts seem to be the tail wagging the dog in a lot of these discussions, how many students from grammar school to high school have been projected to be residents of the area? Because obviously there's besides the stadium, because I was at the first presentation, there's homes, townhomes, condos. So what total amount of students were?
It's yet to be determined, but Mr. Eckloss has some information on that.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely don't have enough information on the plan to determine that. Again, at the end of the day, the Bears have indicated that they don't want to produce a project that generates too many school children. They're going to work to not do that. We won't approve it. But the only example I can give is in our downtown area, which is a mixed-use area, not that different in size than the non-stadium part of that we're talking about. We generate currently under 50 children.
And I agree with that. That's why I brought it up. I don't disagree with that. I think that's pretty much spot on with those numbers, give or take. So I don't see where the school districts for 50 students are really going to have an impact with the tax revenue to basically decide or undecide or have that much of a force in this decision-making process.
Well, it's really been a collaborative effort. Certainly, it's a tripartite agreement between the school districts, the Bears, and the village, and so we've all had equal voices, and we've listened to everybody, trying to protect everybody's interests.
No, I have children or a child in 214, so it's not that I'm not involved in this. My child went through the whole, from grammar school all the way to high school in this district. So just to reemphasize, I think that has to be put in the proper consideration. And I do appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else in the audience? All right, seeing none, we'll come back to the board for further discussion or a motion. Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. I just want to make a clarification. I misspoke earlier. I was looking in the audience and I saw faces, and I used the term District 25, and everyone here knows that it's not part of this equation. But for anyone who's reporting, it is not District 25. Thank you.
Okay. All right, any further discussion, or do we have a motion? What's the will of the board? Trustee Baldino.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I would move approval of a resolution authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding with the Chicago Bears Football Club LLC and school districts 14, 211, and 214. 15, sorry. 15.
Second.
It's three.
All right, motion by trustee Baldino, seconded by trustee Schwingbeck.
See how easy it is?
I did the same thing, trustee Tinaglia.
Further questions or comments from the board? Okay, or the audience? Seeing none, let's take a roll call. It's a resolution.
Sure. Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Grasse?
Yes.
Trustee Dunnington?
Yes.
Trustee Shirley?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
And President Hayes?
Yes. Well, again, I'm very encouraged about where we are at in the process. This is a very exciting evening. This is just another step in the process, but it really is a significant step. It really gets us forward to further exploration and discussion in the hope of making a new Bear Stadium in Arlington Heights a reality. And so, again, we've got a lot of things to talk about in the months and perhaps years ahead, but and the public will be involved in every step of the process, and you will have an opportunity to weigh in. So thank you for being here this evening. We very much appreciate your comments, either on the street or by email or by phone call, and please continue to do that. Reach out to all board members and let us know what you think about this, and we really value your input. And again, thank you to all those involved in this very lengthy but important process in getting us to this point here this evening. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight. We have one other item on the agenda, but if you want to stay for that tax issue, it's approving our tax levy that we just approved last week. Yeah. We just discussed last week.
We discussed it last week, yes, need to approve it. The approval was, I think, the board in error, and we didn't catch the time, approved the budget ordinance twice, not the tax levy ordinance.
I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to leave if you'd like, but if you'd like to stay and hear this second agenda item, you can hear that as well.
Oh, yeah. Nice to meet you. I won't get to review the plans. You know, is there an action? Yeah. Budget meeting? Sure. Yeah.
This is it right here.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Take care of this.
Okay, Mr. Eckles, you want to introduce this topic?
Yeah, so we have discussed the budget multiple times, beginning in June. We had 2 budget meetings in November, and then, of course, last week, we discussed the budget in some detail as well. You all have had it since October. We are, as Village Attorney Passman indicated, the motion was not made in error at the last meeting, and so staff would be just looking for approval of a motion approving the 2025 tax levy in the amount of $54,101,500. And so 2024 tax levy payable in 2025 for that amount. So we'd be looking for a motion. This was required to be approved by mid-December, so we had to bring it to this meeting for reconsideration.
Okay, Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. I would like to move that we recommend to the Village Board of Trustees to authorize staff to prepare the village's and the Arlington Heights Memorial Library's 2024 tax levy ordinance, reflecting an estimated total tax levy of $54,101,500, or a 2.33% increase over the 2023 tax levy for the village and the library portion of the levy.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Motion by trustee Tinaglia, second by trustee LaBedz.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm sorry. Apologies. I don't believe that's the correct motion. That was a motion to recommend direct drafting of a levy. What we're looking for tonight is adoption of the ordinance providing for the levy, assessment, and collection of taxes.
All right, so I was just reading.
I
Yeah, no,
appreciate that.
this one's not on the board.
Mayor, do you want me to take this one?
Where is it at? Mr. Grasse?
I would recommend essentially the language at the bottom of the staff report in the agenda packet, the bottom page 30.
Okay,
appropriate
trustee
motion.
Schwingbeck, go ahead.
Yeah, I would move that staff, or move that the ordinance providing the levy assessment and collection of taxes for the year beginning January 1st, 2025, and ending December 31st, 2025 for the Village of Arlington Heights.
Second?
All right, motion by trustee Schwingbeck, seconded by trustee Baldino. Do we have the right motion now?
Yes,
Yeah.
you do. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, it was for the, it's the 2024 tax levy ordinance is what we're approving, so yes.
Ordinance. Okay. Any further discussion from the board? Anything from the audience? Roll call.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Shirley?
Yes.
LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Grasse?
Yes.
Trustee Dunnington?
Yes.
And President Hayes?
Yes. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Any further business, Mr. Reckles?
Not this evening.
All right, anything from the board under petitions and communications? Just thanks to the Rotary Club of Arlington Heights. We had a record, just over 2,000 Santas running on Saturday morning, and it was great weather, and a good time was had by all. So thanks to the Rotary Club and all those involved in marshaling and running and providing hot chocolate and things like that. And so it was a great time, a great community event. Anything further from the board? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
By trustee LaBedz, seconded by trustee Baldino. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all for joining us this evening.